Welcome to the February 8th, 2018 edition of the Common Sense television show. We are broadcasting on Utica Rome Public Access TV Cable Channel 99, Mondays at 6 p.m., Tuesdays 8 and 9:30 p.m., Wednesdays at 5, Thursdays 8:30 p.m., and Sunday mornings at 8. I'm Frank Vassir, your host. And if you would like to, now you can, like us on Facebook, Common Sense Media. We have several things posted on there. Again, we are on Facebook now, Common Sense Media. And sense is spelled C-E-N-T-S, Common Sense Media. Our guest with us today is Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen. He's been with us before. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Before we go any further, I think, what do you think about Aaron Hammond?
I think it's great. I think it's great having someone from the local area basically carrying the flag in the Olympics for the U.S. I think it's phenomenal. Great news to hear, and looking forward to that. That's very good news for the entire area. Well, Frank, we've talked about many things before. Yes, we have.
But the thing that I think is really caused tremendous concern, and it's getting wider concern, especially when you found out how this whole thing developed, was putting a new Utica hospital in a downtown toxic red zone.
Okay.
And that's what it boils down to. And the thing is, for myself and many people, they feel that the whole thing was, I'll use for diplomatic purposes, flawed from the beginning. It was because of the way it was chosen.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to read you, and people are calling it email gate, and all sorts of ways to identify it.
I'm the one that foiled the emails, by the way.
Right, okay, good. So, talking to the right person.
Yes.
And over the years, Assemblyman Brindisi has publicly denied that he demanded that the new Utica Hospital be constructed in the downtown Utica zone. I was at Westside Senior Center and other places where he spoke over the last couple of years. And when he was asked, he basically deferred it that it was a hospital decision by the Mohawk Valley Health System. However, his emails, one that you were responsible for uncovering, in 2015, his email that was recovered said this, and I'm quoting, "I feel like walking away from this whole thing and telling the community and hospital, if you don't want this thing downtown, then good luck at St. Luke's, and don't come see me for 1 ounce of state support." To me, the brake should have gone on there. Once this whole thing should be shut down, and because there were no studies done at that time. Nothing was done other than basically, what would you call this, a extortion, a bribe? What would you call that statement? You're an attorney.
Well,
right? How would you classify it?
Well, I'd rather describe it in more practical terms. You have someone that has political influence, and we do have to give Mr. Brindisi some credit to having at least limited this pot of money to the Utica area. He did push for a modification of the legislation to state that the hospital is to be in the largest population center. And his intent in doing that is to make sure that it was not going to be inconvenient to Utica residents. And let's face it, that makes perfect sense. Because if it's going to replace St. Elizabeth's and St. Luke's, you want it to be convenient to the Utica population. He went to, from what I could gather from his statements and from what was in the emails, he went to the attorneys in the legislature and had them draft the language that would accomplish that objective. Making it, let me finish, keeping it convenient to the Utica area. But, and what came out of that was the largest population center, quote unquote, in Oneida County. That's, if you know anything about the rules of statutory construction, how do you interpret a law? And all attorneys should know this. If the legislature wanted something specific, they would have said it specifically. If they didn't say something specific, they intended not to be specific. And here, since the legislation, the way it was actually written, did not say the hospitals to be located in the city of Utica. It was never the intent to restrict it to the city of Utica. And if they meant to say the largest city, even that would have restricted it to the city of Utica, largest city in Oneida County in terms of population. They didn't say that. They used the term center, which is different. And they used the word center in relationship to the word population. Well, if you mark every person in Oneida County on a map with a pin, you have a glob over southeastern Oneida County, which is where the city of Utica is, and its suburbs to the west, New Hartford, Whitestown, and so forth. That is the largest population center of Oneida County. That cluster of pins representing all the people in the greater Utica area. And interestingly, the very center of that, if you can imagine it, would probably be right where the St. Luke's campus is right now. And it's interesting because every time now where I see that terminology quoted by one of the officials that are pushing for the downtown site, they say largest population center, comma, i.e. Utica. Well, the legislature didn't put in i.e. Utica for a reason.
But that's to me not to be an honest description. I mean, if you're going to look at it that way, the way they're looking at it, it's not, in my view, an honest way to present it. But if you look at St. Luke's and you just look at population, because no one lives really down on those 3 blocks, but across the street from St. Luke's you have a whole complex with Utica College
Yes.
students. You have all homes around there,
Yes.
behind you, and all over the place. So
the St. Luke's campus is kind of an island in the middle of urban development.
exactly. But with wiggle room, it's got room
It's
to expand.
got room to expand.
It's not boxed in.
Absolutely.
So getting back to this, again, I mean, I feel like walking.
Getting back to what was stated here. So I want to give credit to Mr. Brindisi for at least restricting it to the Utica area. I think that was smart on his part. But I think putting it downtown, where does that notion come from? And the tenor of the emails, from what I could gather, is this is viewed as an economic development type of opportunity, and that's what's driving this idea to put it downtown.
But
that has
by
nothing to-
saying that doesn't make it so, because
No, I
if
know.
on one hand, okay, I'm going to help you and give you $1,000.
Yeah,
But then I go up to your house and do $5,000 worth of damage
yeah.
because you're going to have to, you're going to have to demolish homes and all that. Where's the cost?
Well-
So the development, if you're going to build a hospital, but you have to knock down all these businesses and homes, displace people, displace businesses, lose property tax, lose sales tax.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so outweighed, the negatives outweigh the pluses, but it's still rammed down your throat. And by this, don't forget, this is back in 2015.
Right.
It was said this. And it's been perpetuated, and it continues on. In my view, this should be stopped. This one statement by the Assemblyman should be reason for the board, and I think the board of directors, in my view, the hospital board of the Mohawk Valley Health System, should stand up and say enough is enough. Okay, this was done on a premise that was certainly not something that we're proud of. Wasn't an ethical approach. And our Assemblyman obviously is the gatekeeper because of the funds. It was told to him, I don't know if he fought for the funds, but it was said, here's $300 million we're going to give you. So at that point, okay, he is the go-to person between the state and the citizens. And for him to shut out, and there was some other statements that he also made.
There was an earlier email from Mr. DeMeo to, and I don't remember now which officials it was directed to, but he made a statement to the effect that he's hiring a particular consulting firm in order to guide the siting decision downtown. So
it's putting your thumb on the scale, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's doing more than putting your thumb on the scale. It's basically saying you put it downtown because that's what we want. And
who said this?
well,
Now,
this was Mr. DeMeo.
To
I think it was.
I That's okay.
I can't
But it wasn't
remember. I
Mr.
can't remember the
DeMille,
officials.
okay.
But here, okay. So now we know we have a predetermined notion that the hospital has to go downtown, and they are going to skew the evidence to lead the hospital board to putting it downtown. They're, probably give them enough plausible deniability, I think is the word that they can use. Well, we can point to this and say, well, these are the reasons why we put it downtown. But it's really because the site was predetermined. Where was predetermined? Well, we know Mr. Brindisi wants it downtown. We know Mr.
Demands. To me, this was an ultimatum. This wasn't a request, or this wasn't an urging. This was an ultimatum, if you read this.
The November
I feel like
statement.
walking away, and don't come see me
Yes.
for an ounce of state support
Well, I
for
think
St.
that's,
Luke's.
well, I think
That's an ultimatum.
Well, I think that's what it's come down to, because they made the decision to put it downtown, and basically they're saying, you hospital board, have to depend on us to shepherd your application through.
And when you're
And
saying
we're
us,
not
you're
gonna-
talking about Assemblyman Brindisi and Mr. DeMille
And all the local
and Mr.
officials,
Vicente.
Mr. Pacendi,
Okay. So-
they know that there's a
They've got that much power.
there's a dependency relationship there. Because let's face it, what's the hospital board going to know about going to the state and applying for grants? We've got Edge. Edge has, in my opinion, has a dismal record in terms of economic development in this area. And I think the projects that they have advanced have caused urban sprawl and have actually increased the cost of doing business in this area. And I could go on and on and on about, I think, the horrible results that we've had by having this agency do our economic development for us. But that aside, they do have an expertise in going after state grants and securing them. They know the process. So I'm going to give credit where it belongs, but where the whole thing goes off the rails is they suddenly fancy themselves as experts in urban planning and experts in public policy making, and they're not that.
But
So
that's,
they're taking their position of where they do have some power and credibility, and they're using it to achieve results that they really are not qualified to make a judgment on.
and it's, I've said this on many things in the past and that we've done. It's not what we do, it's how we do it. Okay, we got the money for certain projects. That's good. Okay, we went
Yeah.
out and had that, took the initiative and had the persistence to go after the money once we got it and how we spent it. It's always turned out not to be in the best interest of the taxpayer. Especially when you see what the mayor came out with yesterday in the paper, and he said that the 7% is a realistic budget. And he listed a number of things on there for the reason. And one was fixed costs, and the other one was and this was really hit me because on the common council, bonding to me was like the touch of death. He said the long-term debt service. Long-term debt service. Now,
Well, you're just increasing it now if you're committing to a parking garage.
exactly, that's my point. So you're right now, 7% is because of things in the past. And you're gonna go out and add to that for a $40 million, $44 million hospital garage, parking garage, and you're gonna put the taxpayers deeper and form new debt? To me, this is outrageous.
And you're going to do something else. You are eliminating a number of taxpayers who could assist in paying that debt.
With sales tax and property tax.
Sales tax and property tax. And this is not, and this is something that's always bothered me about Utica since I moved back in 2000. Utica doesn't seem to have a problem with public projects that take property off the tax rolls. When I saw the arterial come in, I saw 77 parcels of property being taken off the tax rolls there, and I thought, I don't see anyone from the city objecting.
The arterial originally back in the 60s?
No. Oh, no. Well, that was hundreds of
Okay, right.
parcels of property.
You're
But I'm
talking
talking,
about the
it even
latest.
goes back, it was worse back when the arterial was started, because there, the city actually paid half of the acquisition costs for those parcels of property. So it was even
Worse.
it was even worse.
But you're talking about the
But
new-
I'm talking about now, since 2000. I'm seeing, you know, you had the 77 parcels taken for this new arterial remake. Okay, nice looking highway. We can debate how good it is for the neighborhood. I personally think it was wrong for the neighborhood, but that's my opinion. But the idea is you took quite a few parcels off the tax rolls, and there were quite a few businesses that went along with that. These are taxpayers. That helps stabilize the city's tax base and pays for filling the potholes. On top of that, now you had the new county parking lot. They took, I think, 3 businesses for that. Small thing, but you know, it adds on. Now you're going to do 90 plus parcels of property off the tax rolls. Yeah, I understand a lot of them are vacant now, but if you're old enough and to remember the 60s, back when Utica was 100,000 people and it was full, quote unquote,
Yeah.
we were considered landlocked. There was no place to expand. There was no place for Utica to further grow its tax base. Well, okay, so now we're shrinking, but now we're also giving up all that potential to regrow the tax base to what it was.
We need to take a break. When we return, we will continue our conversation with Frank, Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen. Thank you for staying tuned to the February 8th, 2018 edition of the Common Sense Television Show. And again, you can like us now on Facebook, Common Sense, CENTS Media, Common Sense Media, our Facebook page. Way to get to us. Our guest is Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen, and if you would like to be a guest, to suggest a guest or make a comment, call 315-724-8884 or email us at commonsensenewyork@gmail.com. Getting back to one of the things about the arterial. When the arterial was first built, back in the 60s, okay, that was a big mistake. But to compound it by doing what we did, and all we did was make the arterial a speed through Utica so you can hit all the lights in the traffic in the downtown for New Hartford to your shopping. Because as soon as you get up to the traffic light where the Onondagas is, that's New Hartford.
Yep.
And you hit all those lights so that you can conveniently stop to go to all those businesses up there.
What
So we funneled everything, get out of Utica fast so you can go to New Hartford, stop at the lights and look where you want to go and shop.
Well, you use the word funnel, and I think that's an appropriate word. I keep using the term street grid, and I want people to get used to what that means. And
Street grid?
Street grid. And just picture a grid in your mind. You know, streets going north and south and crossing east and west. And that's how they traditionally design cities, around a grid of streets. So if you got one street blocked, you can just go over to the next street and go where you have to go. Certain streets are considered major thoroughfares, you have minor thoroughfares, you have local streets. When they put in the arterial, what they did is they cut off a number of major streets.
Not just one or two, dozens.
Forcing people to use the arterial. And by doing that, what they did is they actually made places in New Hartford, time-wise, closer to neighborhoods in Utica than neighborhoods in Utica are actually geographically.
True.
And by doing that, and the city supported it back in the 1960s, but back then, you know, we didn't think of, it was all new, and everyone was in love with the automobile.
No, I understand that, but compounding it,
But
we've
actually
had 40 years to
Yes.
just figure out mistakes.
So why would you
I've been to Denver, I've been all over the world, but I've been to big cities, Sacramento, California, San Francisco. You don't see them having all these bridges. They use traffic. They use traffic. They use the boulevard concept.
Yes.
And what they'll do is have 2 lanes going east and west, two east and then 2 west, 2 north, 2 south, and then each left-hand lane at a light, they'll have a big chute, each left-hand lane, and then they use the good markers where they have a person and it tells you how many seconds you have left across the street. They don't put bridges over, well, pedestrian bridges over, and those populations are 10 times the size of Utica.
Yes.
And they do it with Boulevard. Now, and we didn't see it, and we just repeat the same
Well,
mistakes.
if you remember, there were a number of us that were trying to push for a boulevard, but, and actually, that was one of the preferred alternatives that came out of the hearings with DOT, but DOT, I think, had pulled a fast one on us, unfortunately. I think they knew ahead of time what they were going to do, and
Well, that's just like with this.
It
Has
is-
anything changed?
and
It's the public, and as a matter of
it
fact,
becomes window dressing, all the public hearings, and
one of the other emails, and I think you can enlighten us a little more, didn't Assemblyman Brindisi refer to people as idiots? We got to basically shortstop the idiots from getting involved with this?
I don't know if he used that word, but that
believe-
was sort
I
of
believe
like
it
the
was.
thrust of.
So, I mean, it's just like the arterial and everything else. It's preconceived, it's predetermined, and then, I hate to use a cliche, it's like rearranging the decks on a
Sinking ship.
On a sinking ship.
Right.
And we just get battered and mistreated time and time again. It's taxpayer abuse on steroids. And we just don't seem to learn from our mistakes. And I think, and I forgot who used the term, I think it was very appropriate, that it just shows that the taxpayers feel that the disdain that is held by their leaders on the way they're treated. I mean, it seems they disdain any input from us, they don't want it, and they just basically tolerate the taxpayer and maneuver us.
This is one. Okay, I got to tell you where I'm coming from here. This is one thing that has bothered me since I moved back to Utica. Now, in one of my previous jobs, I held hearings all over the state on some very major projects. I've done them down in Brooklyn. I've had a couple thousand people attending my hearings. I did one on a major incinerator out in Syracuse. There were thousands of people attending those hearings as well. The public knows a lot. They know a lot more than elected officials.
Want them to know.
Yeah, want them to know, but give them credit for it. And I was always amazed at what I would learn about a project by just listening to the public.
Public comment periods.
Public comment periods. And I think it's important that our local officials start paying attention to the people that they allegedly serve. Just because you got elected to office doesn't make you smarter than everyone else. You're just like everyone else. But collectively,
that's not the atmosphere.
but collectively, if you listen to the public, you will take on the benefit of the collective knowledge of the public. If you are really honest and open yourself to the public's ideas and incorporate them into your decision making. And it's not just window dressing. You don't just do it to comply with some legal requirement, because I've seen that done, and I've done it enough where I know where someone is really serious about listening to the public, and someone is just, well, the law says I have to have public hearings, so I'm going to check the box off.
Don't you feel that happens more often than not?
People have concerns that need to be addressed, and I think it happens more often that the public's concerns are not addressed, and we end up with bad government and bad decisions that have there's something called like the law of unanticipated consequences.
Yeah, but we can anticipate them now because we
Yeah,
know it's
I
going to
know,
turn out bad.
I know.
We may not know the details, but
I
we know
know,
it's
I
going to
know,
be bad.
I know.
Well, let's get back to the budget for just a minute. So Mayor Palmieri said, and he listed the number of things that caused the 7% increase, which he validates, and he says it's the long-term debt. Now you're going to hear, and I heard it for 8 years as a former council member. We have to look for new revenue sources. Every year it's the same baloney. You hear that for about 3 or 4 weeks. We haven't done it. We don't have any new revenue sources. Now that's not under our control. But the one thing under our control is when a person loses their job, okay, okay, they don't have any control, they lost their job. But they do have control of not going out and spending money to go to Disney World and putting
Right.
the family deeper in debt.
Right.
And I think this budget here shows that this hospital parking garage should be, every councilman should vote no on it. If they don't, the public should really remember the fall.
Well,
Because this they have total control over.
But you know what's going to happen when you get to the common council, because I've been through this with them before. Oh, if you don't vote for this, we're going to lose the hospital. And no one wants to be the one that somebody can point to, even though it really isn't true.
That's a ridiculous excuse.
But they're going to say, oh, I don't want to be the one that stands in the way of the
So
hospital.
you want to be the one to drive the taxpayers further into new debt.
Because things tend to take the course of least resistance, and it's easier just to simply pile more onto the taxpayers than it is to personally take on responsibility
But
for
you're not doing
decision.
the job, because
I don't think they are.
without, I like to,
But
I like to
I've been
bring
through
this,
this with them before.
I use this as an example, like Kenny Rogers said it, and he summed it up without any ambiguity. No one to hold them and no one to fold them,
Right.
okay? And that's the way it is. You have total control of putting people into new debt. You don't
Yeah.
have control or looking for new revenue. So
Yeah,
would-
to give you an example, the county has put in a new interceptor. This was like 2 or 3 years ago.
What is that?
Sewer interceptor to North
Yeah, right,
Utica.
yes.
Supposedly, this was necessary to serve the Marcy Nano complex.
Well, we'll talk about that
Okay.
too.
Okay. Well, I know we
A little
could,
bit.
but supposedly it was to serve that. If you know anything about sewers and how sewage treatment plants work, and I do because I worked for a consulting firm to EPA many years ago.
That's where your forte is.
Well, I can't say I got a forte because it goes back now 30 years.
But I mean, when you did these judges, what kind of cases were they? They were
Well, this one I was actually for a consulting firm. This was even before
for environmental.
environmental consulting firm.
So that's what you dealt with most of the time.
Yeah, and you know, if you're dealing with a processor of chips, their wastewater is very different. It probably shouldn't be going through the public sewer system. They probably could treat it on site and then release it.
Have their own
to
holding ponds
have,
and that.
and have their own release.
But that
and
wasn't
not
the
go
case.
through the
That's
public.
not the case here.
Well, I'm not sure what they're doing, but they use the nano site as the justification for building this new interceptor. And I'm thinking, okay, so in the interceptor, where it came down to the common council, is the common council had to give an easement across some land in North Utica to allow the interceptor to be built. And I'm thinking, why would the county authorize that interceptor, or why would the city rather, why should the city authorize that interceptor when it's only going to be used to bring public sewer services and more development to a suburban area? And the people of Utica are going to be paying for it because they are the bulk of the users of the sewer system. And I brought this up, and the response I got from one councilman, I can't remember who it was, is, well, you don't believe in regional cooperation. And I believe in self-preservation.
If it's not going to financially destruct your own.
Why should the people in the city of Utica be paying increased sewer fees? And I don't care how small it is. Why should they be paying increased sewer fees to support suburban development in Marcy? That doesn't make any sense to me.
We need to take another break. And when we return, we will continue our conversation with our guest, Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen, and we will be right back. Thank you for staying tuned to the February 8th, 2018 edition of the Common Sense Television Show. I'm Frank Vasir, your host. Our guest is Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen. And remember now, we are on Facebook, Common Sense Media, Common Sense, CENTS Media. This hospital issue, again, I mentioned about an email that Assemblyman Brindisi sent. Again, let's see, this was September 23rd, 2015. Again, this is an email from Anthony Brindisi. Quote, "There are some comments on my Facebook page about traffic, why a new hospital, loss of tax base, etc. If we don't have a communication strategy, the idiots will fill the vacuum left by our silence."
Okay, so we use that word.
So, who are the idiots?
I guess I'm one.
Anybody that ask questions? Are we idiots?
I guess if you're concerned about the loss of tax base, you're an idiot. If you're concerned about maybe being caught in traffic on the way to hospital, and I noticed the other day when I drove through downtown in the morning, there was no hockey game going on at the Odd. There was a little snow on the road. The traffic was moving very slowly. I guess I'm an idiot for being concerned about funneling all hospital traffic through Oriskany Boulevard.
And when you think about it, now, he's our assemblyman. Does this garner confidence when you see what's really going on in the back of someone's thought process?
Well,
And what they portray publicly versus what they portray privately?
I think it should be of concern.
So now, another thing is, well, let's go over a couple more since you helped unfold these, because they're very insightful. Here's one. This one is dated September 2nd, and it's from Steve DeMayo. And I'm going to read the quote. "The noise from an ambulance is just pure BS. The Bag Square people, Brent," I think he meant Brett.
Yeah, I think
Brett
so.
Truitt. Brent, Michelle, Beth Irons needs to get their heads out of their
Beep.
beam. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people that are supposed to be the
Right.
pillars of
Right.
professionalism.
You know, you can have a difference of opinion on some of these things. Okay.
Is that the way to refer to people?
No, because maybe to you, the noise from an ambulance is no big deal.
'Cause you
To
live
somebody else,
10
it
miles away.
is a big deal. And at least respect that difference of opinion. And listen to what the other person has to say. Because, again, you might learn something. Don't just use that one point on which you disagree to basically throw up a roadblock and not want to talk to these people at all. Because that's the impression you get from reading that email, that they think, oh, well, these people are just a bunch of idiots, so there's no reason to pay any attention to them because I disagree with them on this little point or that little point. You don't treat people like that.
Well,
Or let's put it this way, if you are a public servant in the true sense of the word, you do not treat people like that.
and I think it, a couple more emails, because to me they're very pertinent, and people that are reading these and that have sent them to me are very upset. Again, this is from Assemblyman Brindisi, sent September 1st, 2015. Quote, "There is a Facebook group called No Downtown Hospital that is up to 300 members. The members of the group include people like Ryan Miller from the Thinkubator, Michelle Truitt from the Downtown Development Association, John Brown from Caldwell Banker, and a certain state senator to remain nameless." And many people think he was referring to Senator Griffin. Continuing on, "I can foresee this becoming an issue. Eventually, this will hit mainstream media, so we should discuss how to combat this. I know Ray wants us," and I believe he's speaking about Ray Meyer. "I know Ray wants us to be low-key on location, but I don't want public opinion derailing this."
So, again, it's like, it doesn't matter what the public thinks about the location of this proposed hospital. This is what, I guess you could say elites, because it demonstrates an elite mentality on the part of the speakers in these emails, that they know what's best for everybody else. Everyone else is a bunch of idiots, apparently, and public opinion is just something that we have to deal with, and it's an issue that's in our way to achieve our ends, whatever our ends are. This is very troubling to me, because again, I know I spent my career in government because I wanted to serve the public, and I would like to see that on the part of others as well, that they, in a true sense, and in a humble sense, that you don't know all the answers, because I know I don't know all the answers. I've learned a lot through experience and training, but I don't know all the answers, and I understand that. And I want to hear from other people. And I'm not seeing that kind of approach from the people that are really making the decisions in the community. And they're not just the elected people. People like Mr. Berdisi's elected, people like Mr. Pacenti is elected, but then you have people like Mr. DeMeo, who actually has gotten a position of de facto power, because I've called Edge many times now the county's de facto planning agency, because they seem to be able to get in there and change the rules on planning for wherever they go, or make the rules, and it's troubling to me.
Now, in the beginning of all this discussion, and again, I guess this whole thing started in 2014, 2015?
Well, it was
When was it announced?
downtown site was announced.
No, when was the money announced that it was being allocated to Utica?
I don't remember. I think it might have been 2014.
End of 2014, beginning of 2015, okay? So 2014, the hospital, this whole deal starts with the hospital downtown.
And January 2015 is the first email that refers to downtown, thereabouts, January or February.
Okay, so let's even say 14 for the sake of argument.
Sure.
Okay, but now if you look at this on the screen here, and you see the date is 2012. 2012 is the date, and this is an emergency response guidebook. And it's a guidebook for first responders during the initial phase of a dangerous goods, hazardous materials, transportation incident. That's what this is. And what this says, and I'll read it to you, and you can go online and get that. What it says is, and I'll read this, the United States Department of Transportation in 2012, their experts created an emergency response guidebook for first responders during the initial phase of a dangerous goods, hazardous materials, transportation incidents. It designates a 1/2 mile radius on any train track route used to transport flammable oil and toxic materials as an evacuation red zone. This is a United States agency,
Right.
okay, who designated that to be a dangerous zone. That was 2 years before the hospital
Right, an
was even
evacuation
thought of,
zone,
an evacuation zone. So now you have, the hospital announces that it's going to put it downtown. You see the emails now from Assemblyman Bendisi and others saying that it was all fixed. No, they knew that this was a toxic red zone, and they still went ahead to put a hospital, an evacuation center inside the evacuation zone.
Yeah, okay, first of all, about the red zone. This is, okay, it's an official evacuation zone, according to
DOT,
US,
United States Department of
US
Transportation.
DOT. So it's something that has to be dealt with, and it's something that has to be taken into consideration with the siting criteria. And there's no regulation apparently that prohibits the siting of a hospital or anything else within a red zone, but they are saying if you got an accident, this area is going to have to be evacuated. So we're going now from basically 2 hospital sites down to 1. First 2 hospital sites are not in the red zone, but the one that we're going to have remaining in Utica will be within the red zone. Maybe it'll never happen, but God forbid if it happens, our only hospital facility is going to have to be evacuated. Why would you put the hospital in such a location? And this is where we get down to the siting criteria. The super secret siting criteria that no one wants to disclose, that they say will probably come out during the SEQRA process, but really should have been made a matter of public discussion all along. And again, here's where I think our regional leadership has not served the public. Every time we hear about the siting criteria, EDGE says, well, we took the hospital, all the hospital's needs, and we looked at various sites. We looked at 12 sites on a map. And I'm thinking, okay, so you looked to see what would meet the hospital's needs. Fine. What meets the public's needs? What are your criteria to meet the public's needs? And EDGE is funded in large part by the county, either directly or through the power that the county has given EDGE over control over certain assets. Where were the criteria to protect the public? I haven't seen that anywhere. This is an example of a criteria for site selection that protects the public. You are knowingly taking on a risk that, God forbid, we have an accident within a half mile of that hospital. That hospital is going to have to be evacuated. Where are those people going to go?
Well, you're going to have 400 people,
But there's a lot of,
bedridden patients trapped in their rooms and on operating tables. You don't have 400 ambulances.
I know.
Those people, that's going to end up being a tomb.
It could be. You know, I mean, you could think of the worst case scenario.
Well, just the
God
other day
forbid.
now, I think it was Monday, there was a train fire, a locomotive caught fire in Yorkville.
Yeah, and that was kept a pretty big secret, wasn't it?
And I sent Dave Dudayek a note on that because the OD didn't cover it. And in the story that was covered, I think by KTV, said it's under investigation.
Mm-hmm.
My email to Mr. Dudayek, is the newspaper going to print that? It wasn't in the paper because this was a fire. It's under investigation. It seemed to be newsworthy. Mm-hmm. He sent back, I'm not sure, he referred me to the city desk. I called the city desk and talked to Fran Paratano, and he said they sent a reporter down. The reporter took a picture, and they deemed it not newsworthy. I said to him, I said, well, Fran, I said, it's under investigation. And he said, well, we didn't deem it newsworthy. And I know the paper's editorials favor the downtown.
Yes.
So I think that's really a conflict there. Everybody else doesn't see it that way, but withholding news from the public is just as bad as giving,
Well,
in my view, wrong information.
I think we've seen that for many years in this area. It's very difficult to get the full information out to the public.
And using the excuse now, and I guess because...
But I do want to get back to the citing criteria, because the county paid EDGE $250,000 to perform appraisal work for the hospital. I mean, this is giving money to a private entity, and they've already made the decision that the hospital is the best place for it. Somebody's already made that decision. But what are their criteria? What criteria did they use? We've got criteria in the law that provides the money for the hospital as to it's supposed to foster an integrated system of healthcare. What were any of those criteria, the legal criteria, applied to the citing decision? Or is this going to be one of those things where they just make a few checks off a box and say, and give some off the cuff explanation as to how they're meeting the criteria? But if you're going to have an integrated system of healthcare, you're supposed to have the licensed facilities put together. Right now, you've got the St. Luke's Hospital on the St. Luke's campus, but you also have their licensed nursing home, and you have their licensed rehab facility. By removing the hospital off the St. Luke's campus and putting it downtown, it seems to be contrary to the intent of the grant legislation to foster an integrated system of care. So it's like, well, where is this? Again, that's to protect the public with a specific objective, to improve their health care. They're going to be moving the hospital away from basically what has become our de facto medical district. We've got the facilities that are on the St. Luke's campus that there's no plan to move. But you also have the new Omni Surgical Center on French Road. You have Slocum Dixon Medical Group on Burstone. And you have the Utica Business Park that's increasingly becoming from normal type businesses into medical service businesses.
Which makes sense.
And it makes sense because it's near the hospital. Now you're taking the hospital away from that group, and don't tell me that the siting decisions made by those individual doctor groups were not influenced by the presence of the hospital. I think the presence of the hospital made them choose that location. It took them 50 years though to get up there. But these facilities are all new. And now you're going to take the hospital away from them, the anchor, and move it downtown? How does that foster an integrated system of care? It makes it more difficult for people to get care, because if they've got to go from their provider to the hospital for some reason, they've got to drive across town. It doesn't make sense.
We need to take a break. When we return, we will finish up with our guest, Frank Montecalvo, and we will be right back. We are back. Frank Montecalvo is our guest. He's a concerned citizen, and there are many out there that feel the way he does, that this hospital issue has been contrived and shoved down the throats of the citizens of Utica. In this 2012 Emergency Response Guidebook that was issued by the United States Department of Transportation, apparently, I believe it was Wednesday, the 7th, February 7th, Mr. Schofield, who I believe was on the Bill Keeler Show, and on there, he made an unchallenged remark that there is no such thing as a red zone, and that the hospital would not be going into a toxic red zone, and it is. And I find these statements when people make them, Mr. Schofield has made in the past, many statements that not only can't be substantiated, but just aren't true. And not calling this a red zone when it's in black and white. And again, you can go online and look for Department of Transportation. And each year they reissue this. So it's in 2012, 13, 14. But it started in 2012, 2 years before the hospital was even thought of being an issue.
I think the issue here though is federal DOT is saying, you have to evacuate within a half a mile of one of these toxic spills. That's a requirement. You can't get around that. But
if you have 400 patients on operating tables and bedridden, how are you going to do it?
I know. There's no veto power though by the DOT over the siting of a hospital. And I don't think there should be, because then you're getting into the whole issue of, well, how burdensome do you want to make the right? But here again, it gets back to siting criteria. There is no evidence that when Edge did the study to site the hospital, that they used any criteria at all to protect the public interest. This emergency response guidebook strongly suggests, and I think it's really plain, is that it doesn't make sense to site what's going to become your only hospital within an area that's going to have to be evacuated if there's a toxic spill.
And I think
that's a siting criteria. But how about other criteria to protect the public?
Well, there are several, but they've just been ignored.
And this is one of my frustrations with the master plan too. It's like, what do you hope to accomplish? What did Utica hope to accomplish with some of its planning decisions? And we've got now a zoning ordinance. We've got the Gateway District regulations. We've got the master plan. All these things were tailored to create a certain environment in Utica, and hopefully would produce positive results for the public. All the things in those official pronouncements of the city of Utica that were enacted over many years, all those things should have been used as citing criteria to protect the public interest. It's Mr. Brindisi and Mr. DeMeo and Mr. Pacenti can't on their own deem what's in the public interest. They really need to be guided by the official enactments of the city of Utica. And they've taken those enactments and they've basically thrown them away. Just like they apparently have thrown away this DOT red zone issue. There are things there that are believed to protect the public interest. You don't just do these things as an exercise. You want to give these things meaning. We've got now an issue with, okay, let's get back to economic development. Economic development seems to be the justification for every bad decision that we've had around here.
Because economic development is good. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, you want
But how we do it, we always mess it up.
And really, I think that's really why this hospital is being put downtown, is not because it meets some requirement of the grant legislation, because as I just explained, it appears to be contrary to the requirements of the grant legislation, and not because the governor wants it downtown, because the emails make perfectly clear that state officials thought at the beginning that the idea of putting it downtown was nonsense. So it's clearly an idea that was conceived and hatched locally by our local officials that are in power. They have positions of power, either direct through their election or through positions of influence, like Edge. They've decided on their own what's in the public interest, and throw out anything else that might have been officially enacted.
And that brings into question their leadership skills and their leadership abilities.
Well, their dictatorship abilities is what it comes down to, because they are not allowing themselves to be constrained by what's already been enacted. And if you don't like what's been enacted, the answer for that is to go through the process and change it. But they don't do that, because that's messy. That involves the idiots among us. We're going to have a role in the process of that.
Well,
and they don't want to have to deal with that. It's better to be a dictator and just tell people, this is the way it's going to be, and it's our way or the highway, and that's exactly what's revealed in the emails as to the attitudes.
I think when all is said and done, for me, I'm speaking personally now, they disregard all the financial things that you talked about, all the processes and all of those things that normally should have been done with the public, step-by-step knowing what's going on. That's all been just voided and disregarded. But to think the one thing that transcends this whole thing, that what's being done here raises ethical and morality issues, because you're going to put a hospital in an evacuation zone and basically trap 400 bedridden patients and people on operating tables.
I think that's
to me, that's a moral
problem.
issue,
Yep.
and I think that should stop this whole thing, because you're going to have, if something happens and the lawsuits begin, Utica will go bankrupt, because any attorney is going to say all this is going to be on record. The city, the county, the state was put on notice that what they were doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens, God forbid, people die in that hospital. There'd be millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you were a judge on there, what would wouldn't that be what you said? It'd be a good argument.
I think that's a good argument.
So it'll become a tomb. It'll cause the city will have to go bankrupt. There's no way that they'll be able to pay off all the claims, because they knew the danger beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I think, let's put it this way. The accident has to happen, and you have to have those results. But if that does happen, there's going to be a big problem.
The city will be destroyed.
Yeah, but the city's destroying itself anyway, right now.
But it'll be done in one fell swoop. It'll be done very quickly. Closing thought, Frank Montecalvo has been our guest, and as usual, very candid and very thorough. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Closing thoughts.
We really need to get back to square one, Obviously, you don't want to turn down a gift of money like this, and the area certainly deserves a state-of-the-art healthcare facility. But why put it in a place where there are negative consequences for so many people? Both people are going to lose their livelihoods in this. And to me,
And possibly their lives.
And that should be a concern to everyone. Why do that when it can all be avoided by simply putting it right on the campus that the hospital already owns? Money will be saved, obviously, because you're not going to have acquisition costs. Taxpayers' money in Utica is going to be saved because you're not going to have to build a parking garage up there. It just doesn't make sense what it is that they're proposing. The idea, and it's just basically on the notions of certain individuals that somehow this is going to benefit Utica. When we've done this before. State office building, county office building, urban renewal number 1. You can't just come in and bulldoze an area and expect private development and economic activity to come back, especially when you've destroyed the livelihoods of the people that are required to do that private economic development. It's just not going to happen. Utica's cutting its nose off to spite its face here, and it's predicted. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do.
I share your frustration.
I know. I know. It makes no sense what it is that they're doing.
Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Frank Montecalvo, concerned citizen. This will be on our Facebook page by tomorrow. Well, tomorrow being Friday, on the 9th. So again, the Common Sense Media, Facebook is Common Sense Media. Common Sense spelled C-E-N-T-S. I'm Frank Vasseria, host, and hopefully we will see everyone next week.